Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're traveling back in time to a very specific, beautifully ordinary moment. Picture this. It's March 1918, we're in San Diego, and we are looking right over the shoulders of a young couple, Emily and Lyle, as they sit together at a kitchen table. Right between them rests this serious cloth-bound notepad. Now, it's not just any notepad. It actually belongs to their fiercely practical friend, Georgia. And on this particular Thursday evening, that notepad is being used to meticulously map out a wartime wedding. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the exact checklist they created, mirroring the categories in their notebook. First, finding a home. Second, the blue silk dress. Third, ceremony and reception. Fourth, the honeymoon. And finally, 95 days. Starting with Section 1, finding a home, subtitled Accommodating 3 on a Private's Pay. So the immediate logistical hurdle for our newlyweds wasn't just finding a place for 2 people, it was actually finding a place for 3. They had to figure out how to include their fiercely independent, delightfully blunt friend, Georgia, whom they literally couldn't imagine leaving behind. So the crucial point that dictated their reality was this hard number, $38. That was Lyle's entire monthly salary as a private first class in 1918. While it was a step up from his previous pay, it certainly wasn't a fortune, right? As a married enlisted man, Lyle could live off base, but they needed housing that was extremely modest, highly practical, and most importantly, close to a trolley line so he could commute to the military base every single day. Taking that strict $38 budget, Emily and Lyle started doing the math on the back of the notepad. They hammered out a very specific set of requirements for a 4-room flat. They wanted an upper flat on Fern Street, nice and close to the 30th Street trolley line, with a rent that actually fit a private's budget. But honestly, the absolute best part of this checklist is that final bullet point, a room facing the garden. When Georgia saw Emily write this down, she deadpanned that she didn't actually require a garden. Emily's response, "I know, I require you to have one." It's just a brilliant little glimpse into their dynamic, just a chosen family setting up their life together. Moving on to Section 2, the blue silk dress or sensible wartime fashion. The grand, lavish white gowns of peacetime tradition were completely set aside for the practical realities of wartime, and this brilliantly illustrates that shift. Just one word, simple. This was the definitive verdict handed down by Mrs. Hennessy, a veteran seamstress at Marston's department store who they brought in to make Emily's dress. Listen, when a 60-year-old woman with 15 years of experience, someone who makes chalk marks on fabric with absolute terrifying certainty, says simple, it's not a description, it's an instruction. Actually, Emily's highly organized friend Gladys orchestrated this entire dress situation before Emily even had a chance to stress out about it. The final design they settled on was this, a modest, modern blue silk dress paired with a crisp white hat, featuring simple lace at the collar and cuffs. It completely abandoned the traditional white gown in favor of something that perfectly understood its own occasion. It was designed for a quiet, modest 1918 church wedding. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. It was just exactly right. Which brings us to Section 3, Ceremony and Reception, a mix of arithmetic and affection. Now, this part of the planning is where Lyle's precise, auditor-like mind really had to kick into gear. To reconcile their limited physical space with their large, wonderful, chosen family. But before they could even count heads, they had to tackle a deeply personal question. Who would give her away? This was a really poignant complication for Emily. Her father had passed away 2 years prior, and she had no brothers. Suddenly, the short aisle of the Central Christian Church was looking like a very, very long walk to make alone. So, sitting at that table, they weighed their options. On one hand, there was Uncle Franklin. He was a blood relative, sure, but he lived up in Los Angeles, and honestly, they had been estranged since her father's funeral. On the other hand, there was Georgia. As Georgia herself pointed out while casually knitting, she wasn't an uncle, but she knew the way down an aisle. Her exact words, "I'm what you have." It's a perfect example of Georgia's characteristic warmth, entirely masked by her dry, no-nonsense practicality. Ultimately, Emily did write to Franklin to invite him, but Georgia remained the steadfast, fiercely loyal backup plan. With that emotional hurdle cleared, they hit a hard mathematical wall. 12. That was the maximum comfortable capacity of the Central Christian Church's small parlor. Maybe 16 if everyone was full of goodwill and didn't mind being squeezed together. This incredibly tight physical constraint forced the couple to carefully, and let's be honest, somewhat ruthlessly, calculate their guest list. Now, what's really interesting about this tally is how they balanced arithmetic with affection. You can see the heavy presence of the Carringer side right away. Austin, Della, Edgar, Abby, Davy, Amy, Maybelle, and Aunt Matey. But look over at Emily's side. Aside from Franklin and possibly his wife Ella, the list is rounded out by Georgia, Gladys, and Charlie Morrison. The beautiful takeaway here is that friends like Gladys, who practically willed the wedding dress into existence, and Charlie were officially deemed family without a second thought. They counted 13 possible, 11 certain. It was a tiny wedding, for sure, but it was completely theirs. The ceremony itself was officially locked in for June 19th. Lyle cornered Reverend Crabtree in the vestibule right after a Sunday service, and the Reverend, opening up his own calendar book, set the date with the finality of an official act. He outlined a very direct, beautifully simple Protestant structure for them: processional, opening words, the vows, exchange of rings, the pronouncement, and finally, the blessing. Simple, complete, and exactly as expected. And as for the reception, well, that was an absolute all-hands-on-deck community effort, hosted at Lyle's parents' house on 30th Street. His mother, Della, offered her dining room and garden before anyone even had to ask. The menu: cold meats, bread, Della's famous rolls, seasonal vegetables, lemonade, tea, and of course, Georgia's lemon cake serving as the wedding cake. Aunt Matey volunteered to handle the garden flowers. When Emily casually remarked that it would be lovely, Della quickly corrected her, stating that it would be correct, which, if you knew Della, was a far higher standard than just lovely. Moving to Section 4, the honeymoon, or as I like to call it, the mathematics of romance. Now, this represents a quiet, secret project that Lyle had been orchestrating in the margins of his military supply logs since February. You see, the U.S. Grant Hotel on Broadway was absolutely the finest hotel in San Diego at the time. In 1918, a standard room there cost roughly $3 a night. Lyle, methodically saving whatever small reserve he could from his $38 a month salary, had been planning for months just to afford exactly 2 nights for them. $6 total, plus meals, to celebrate the start of their new life together. When Lyle proudly revealed this master plan at the kitchen table, talking up the white linen and the view of the bay from the upper floors, Georgia was sitting right there at the end of the table, seemingly completely absorbed in a letter from her sister. Without missing a beat, she lowered the letter and casually noted that the U.S. Grant had exceptional breakfast toast, having stayed there herself back in 1912. When Emily and Lyle just stared at her in stunned silence, she delivered this absolute gem. "I'm not coming on the honeymoon. I'm merely noting the quality of the toast." It is just brilliant, deadpan wit, perfectly interrupting the romantic honeymoon vibes at the kitchen table. Let's move to our final stretch and see how this builds in Section 5, 95 days, the countdown to June 19th. Taking a step back, this planning timeline gives us a sense of their quiet, disciplined march toward their big day. Lyle actually started squirreling away his military pay way back in August of 1917. By January 1918, he was refining that budget and making early contact with the U.S. Grant Hotel. Then we hit March, the core of our story today, where the couple formally maps everything out in George's notebook. In April, Mrs. Hennessy would schedule the very first fitting for that blue silk dress, all leading to June 1918, the wedding day itself. It's a really incredible testament to long-term dedication finally coming together during those Thursday night kitchen sessions. Fast forward slightly, following a lively joint family dinner in mid-March, where all these plans were enthusiastically debated and discussed, Lyle walked Emily and Georgia to the trolley stop. The night was cool and clear over San Diego. After saying his goodnights, Lyle turned toward his own trolley stop. Walking with his hands in his pockets, clutching that cloth-bound planning notebook tightly to his chest, he did the math in his head just one more time. And he realized there were exactly 95 days left until June 19th. 95 days until the flat on Fern Street, the blue silk dress, the small church parlor, and yes, the exceptional toast. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. We are so often conditioned to think that love is all about massive, sweeping, cinematic, grand gestures. But looking closely at Emily and Lyle's story, it kind of forces us to ask, is it possible that true romance isn't found in grand gestures at all, but rather in the meticulous, caring details of a $38 budget and a quiet Thursday night at the kitchen table? Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll leave you to reflect on that. See you next time.